Hello, welcome back. We are in to 2026 now. Hope everyone is having a great year, great start to this January of 2026. Today, we're going to dive into a theme that I've been talking a lot about on other platforms. If you read my Business of Coaching newsletter, if you look at some of my content on social media, it's the concept of radical clarity. And I've looked at it through the lens of business, looked at it through the lens of training. I've looked at it through the lens of all of these different parts of our lives. And I wanted to bring that together in this episode to condense what it really looks and feels like to have radical clarity in our lives. And the core thesis that I'm operating off of here, the reason that I've dove deep into this topic specifically is that I think that most people aren't exhausted because they're doing too much. They're exhausted because they're unclear on what actually matters. And I think we can put ourselves in this position. Just bear with me for a second. Just think about, have you ever come to the end of a very full day? You're busy, it's productive on paper, all the things are, happening. You got, meetings, family, all this fullness and seeming productivity, but it still feels oddly restless. You feel dissatisfied. You feel like there's something missing. You did a lot, but it's just not quite there. And I think at the core of this, it's that we're not tired from effort. When we get to the end of those types of days and we're full and we felt like we were productive, but again, something's just missing. It's not that we're tired. It's not that the effort is too much. It's that we're feeling a misalignment or we're feeling fatigue from friction. The friction that comes with running at lots of different things that aren't in alignment. It's whether it's how we're going about our work, how we're connecting with our family, how we're getting support and building friendships, how we're showing up for ourselves and our mental and physical health. All of these things, if they're not in alignment, create friction. And I think that really is at the core of this and what I want you to kind of sit with as we continue to build on this idea of radical clarity. Because what I'd like to anchor this episode in before we get started is the question that if someone looked at your life for 10 minutes, if they could zoom out, if they could be an external observer, if they could look at the full scope, breadth, depth of your life, for 10 minutes, would they understand what it is you're trying to do? Would they understand what you're optimizing for? Would they understand what matters most to you? And so what I'd like to promise on the heels of that is that I promise this episode is not going to be about hustle, or it's not going to be about balance. It's not going to be another version of how to optimize, quote unquote, your life. It is going to be about this concept of radical clarity as a performance indicator and a multiplier for our general well-being. Because what I do know for a fact is that a full calendar does not mean that you have a focused life. And that's what I want to solve for today. I want to understand, I want to help you get the clarity, the radical clarity that is required to know that with a full life, with a full calendar, with a busy schedule also comes a focused life, a one that is in alignment. So let's start by talking about clarity as a skill for endurance. So many of our listeners are athletes, they're endurance athletes, they're strength conditioning athletes, they're coaches, they're trainers, they're people that are in the world of athleticism. And so I want to anchor it or use this as a jumping off point, because there is an athletic parallel here. And even if you're someone who doesn't identify as an athlete, I think that you'll still understand what I'm saying here, because we know that athletes don't fail because they can't suffer. And we could extrapolate this to so many people, high performers. They don't fail because they can't suffer. They fail because they misjudge what's required to do the thing. So if we look at athleticism, they fail because they misjudge the pace or the terrain or the priority, the way that they need to weight the particular endeavors, whether it's an event or a training cycle. Again, same thing with high performers. They fail because they misjudge what's required. They misjudge the intricacies and the specifics that they need to focus on. And so what that is boiled down is that most people are strong enough. I do believe that most people have what it takes to be extremely high performers. I also think that most people are disciplined enough. Now, they might not be deploying that discipline, or they might not have the tools they need for that to be fully manifested. But I think that most people are strong enough, and most people are disciplined enough to go out and do really hard things. I also think that they're capable enough. I think people are smart. And I think that if given the opportunity, the clarity, the chance, I think people can and will rise to the occasion. But the missing piece here is that they are unclear on where the effort should go. They have all of this opportunity, all of these things in front of them, all of this stored potential, but where does the effort go? And so what that feels like is that, again, if we go back to the athlete example, you're training hard, but you don't have any clear objectives. You're saying yes to everything, and you're trying to make that mean something about you. Well, if I just say yes, I must be moving in the right direction. You feel busy, but you're disconnected. And so we know that, or what I'd like to offer up again is endurance as a skill set. And endurance is not about pushing harder. It's about knowing what is worth pushing toward. Right? Endurance is about sustained effort in the clear direction of something that you want. And so just sitting in and dealing with BS and working hard for no reason, or having a packed schedule, or putting up with whatever this is, that's not endurance. That's also not discipline. That's just a lack of clarity. And that's your ability to just stack BS on top of BS, hoping that one day it'll dissipate. And so I want to get rid of that today. And when I thought about this concept of radical clarity, again, it's something I've been digging into. And I've been thinking more about what this actually looks like kind of manifested in our lives. I started to think about, how can we audit our lives? What's an easy way to understand where we're at? What is our positioning in relation to this question that I offered up earlier? That is, if somebody looked at your life for 10 minutes, would they know? Would they know what matters? Would they know what you're optimizing for? And what I boiled it down to is a few questions, specifically 4 questions that I'm gonna frame up here, and I'd encourage everyone listening to go through these. And just imagine someone shadowing your life for 10 minutes. And this is the mental exercise that would go along with that. If someone is shadowing your life for 10 minutes, the first question is, what matters most right now? So not long-term dreams, this current season, right now, the next quarter, the next month, the next week, pick your time frame. What matters most right now? And again, this is near-term, tactical, clear season of your life, not long-term forecasting and dreams. Those are important. By all means, I think that we should have a vision, but what I'm talking about right now is what matters most right now. Next question is, where does your energy actually go? And I want you to be dead serious about this. I want you to audit your time, your attention, your emotional load. Where does your energy actually go? If you're finishing the day and you're exhausted, but you're not getting done what you want to get done, or doesn't feel like you want it to feel, or you don't have time and space and bandwidth for the things that you would like to prioritize, your energy is going somewhere that is not in alignment with what matters. Where is that going? Next, ask the question, what are you training for? I want you to think about this physically. I want you to think about this mentally, relationally, professionally, in all of these areas of your life. And I would encourage you to think about the 4 that I just mentioned as your 4 pillars. We have physically, mentally, relationally, professionally. What are you training for? It doesn't mean you have to be an athlete. It doesn't mean that you have to have a race or some sort of goal. It just means that you have to have benchmarks. You have to have something that you're moving towards. How do you measure success? What is the marker? And again, what are you enduring for? Again, endurance is the ability to sustain effort in a clear direction towards something that you know that you want. So ask yourself, what are you training for? And lastly, ask yourself, what are you carrying that no longer fits this season? What skills, what habits, what mindset, what relationships, what are you carrying? What are you holding on to? What's still dragging behind you or right beside you or in front of you that no longer fits in this season? And when you do that, I want you to think really clearly. That should give you the framework to understand how to make some changes, how to align with a level of radical clarity that moves you in the direction of the things that you want. Now, I've said this a million times on this podcast. I'm not advocating that you make a complete overhaul. Pick one area, right? I'm not saying that we have to scrap everything. Clarity is a gift because it gives us the ability to take action in a specific direction that's going to yield tangible results. So just pick a direction. Pick one thing that you want to move on based on what you get out of this framework. Because we know that misalignment is expensive. I promise you there's a cost here. Whatever you've uncovered when you answer those 4 questions and you're brutally honest with yourself, I promise you that whatever misalignment has been uncovered there is costing you. Even when everything looks good from the outside, whatever bits and pieces aren't fully aligned, I promise you it's showing up in very real ways. All right. So we also struggle with radical clarity because we think that it closes doors. We think that it's this kind of juxtaposition of radical clarity versus keeping options open. So this is where most people avoid clarity because it forces a decision. It's easier to say, I'm just keeping my options open, I'm exploring, versus honing in, versus getting very, very, very specific. So there's a few reasons for this. We know that clarity requires saying no without justification. If you know exactly where you want to go, if you know exactly what's in alignment, if you know 100% what matters most, then it's really easy to say no to things because it's very, very clear what is a no and what is a yes. So when we say no without justification, it's because we know that that's not the highest and best. We also have to know that clarity requires letting go of identities that once worked. If we get really clear on what's working, where we want to go, that means some of the things that we align with and we thought we were really clear on in the past just aren't gonna go with us. That's okay. Good. We can shed that. Also, clarity requires admitting that this season has changed. That can be scary. We don't like the unknown. So we get nervous. We shut down. Right? The antithesis to that is that we know that keeping options open feels safe. Again, because clarity forces a decision. Clarity forces us to admit that the season has changed, that we have to say no. And so when we can keep our options open, when we can tell ourselves and try to convince ourselves that we're keeping options open, and that's truly the best path, that's just because it feels safe. It also creates this constant low-grade tension because we don't know exactly what we should be running at. And so our time always feels like it's spread thin. So while ambiguity in the moment feels flexible, it does slowly drain you. This constant, what should I be doing? Is this working? Am I on the right path? Should I have said no to this? Should I have said yes to this? All of the million questions we have to juggle. We know that while ambiguity feels flexible, ultimately it slowly drains you. So let's take this a step further and let's talk about what this means for how we process stress. Let's talk about what it means for our nervous system. That's something we've been diving deeper into. We've talked about emotional regulation, and what that actually looks and feels like on the last couple of episodes. And I framed this up a bit in our previous episode, which was the first episode at the top of the year. And it's that, this time of year in particular feels very nervous, right? What's going to happen? We're trying to get everything sorted. There's a lot of pressure to get all the pieces and parts in place to set the year up for success. New year, new me, all of this stuff. And I just think it creates this inherent level of stress that is very high. And so I want to talk about how radical clarity is going to inform stress and how it's going to impact our nervous system. So when we don't have clarity, we are really confused. That's really what it boils down to. Without clarity, there is confusion. And with confusion comes this constant onslaught of small decisions, micro decisions. Again, is it a yes or a no? Is this the right thing to pursue or isn't it? Is this my focus or shouldn't it be? All of these tiny little things we're jockeying around and amongst and between. And those micro decisions create an extreme amount of nervous system fatigue. We are ultimately always in fight or flight, because the opposite of that is knowing that we're safe, knowing that we're good, knowing that we've made the right decision, knowing that what we're doing is in pursuit of our highest and best, of the things that matter most to us. Well, the opposite of that is being really scared of what's about to happen, being scared of what's around the next corner. And if we put that in evolutionary terms, it's literally, am I going to turn this corner and there's going to be a lion there? Am I going to have to run for my life? So we're in this constant state of fight or flight because we're making all of these decisions, because of a lack of a clear path. And that puts an extraordinary amount of fatigue and stress on our nervous system. And that fatigue shows up in lots of different ways. It shows up as irritability. You're just low grade, frustrated all the time. You're low grade, irritable, low grade, can't see the forest for the trees, low grade, right? It just doesn't feel good. Poor recovery. So from an athletic perspective, but also just for life, it doesn't matter if you're an athlete, you need to recover. You need to recover from the stress of life. There is a physical and mental cost to moving through our day, specifically as high performers. We have to be able to recover from that. And so when we're not clear, and again, that lack of clarity creates this tremendous load on our nervous system, it does impact us in the physical world. It impacts us from a recovery perspective. We have a loss of motivation as well. If you feel like nothing you're running at is really worth it, then it's going to be really hard to be motivated and feel excited to run in that direction. And then there's going to be a lot of emotional reactivity. You're going to, it's going to be mad, it's going to be sad, it's going to be happy, there's going to be very little regulation. Again, that's something I went deep into in the last couple of episodes. If that's something that you'd like to unpack even more, if you feel like you're emotionally reactive, then I would encourage you to go back to the last couple of episodes. I unpack that in great detail. So what radical clarity does is three things, specific, again, to how we manage stress and our nervous system load. Firstly, it reduces the decision load. So if we don't have to make a million decisions, then immediately there is a reduction on stress on our nervous system. Next, it improves recovery mentally and physically, like I talked about. There is a cost, there's a load, and if we can't recover from that, it continues to stack. Now, if you layer in on top of that a physical load, if you are exercising, then there's a very real physical load there as well. So it starts to compound very quickly. So recovery is paramount. Even if you're someone who doesn't see themselves as an athlete, I promise you recovery is something that you should be focused on. And then lastly, what radical clarity does is it restores our sense of agency. We feel like we have some autonomy. We feel like we can make decisions in the right direction. We feel like we know what we're running at. And that gives us a sense of agency that is very important, right? People like to feel in control, and not from a place of being controlling. Those are different. But from a place of being in control of your destiny, of the decisions you make, of how you rise to the occasion, of how you reach your full potential, of where your effort and energy goes and the results that that ultimately yields. That's part of the human condition, and that's okay. We want to be in control. And when we have radical clarity, it restores a sense of agency that is very important. And I think that really clarity is one of the most underutilized tools that we have. It's one of the most underutilized recovery tools. It's one of the most underutilized business tools. It's one of the most underutilized relationship tools. The list goes on. It impacts all areas of our life. So, what does it look like to get radical clarity? I've talked about what it is, why it's important. Well, how do we get there? We know that it's a few things. I want to first say that I do think it's simple. I think radical clarity can be simple. I know that when people hear me talk about or others talk about getting clear on what matters most, getting clear on what you want, what doesn't create friction, I know that feels heavy. I know that people are like, there's a lot of immovable parts. I don't have control over this, that, and the other. 100%. Most of us don't have control over most of the things in our life, right? We can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we show up. That's literally the only thing we have control over. And I am encouraging you and I am advocating that you take charge of what we do have control over. And I think with that mindset, radical clarity is simple. I think it's also universal. I think it's something that all of us want, whether we want to admit it or not, whether we want to use the I'm keeping my options open, the ambiguity because it feels safe, whether we're using that as a crutch or not, or as an excuse or not. I know that I think it is universal that we want clarity. We want clarity that what we're doing matters, that it adds up to something, that the effort is going to yield results. We don't have the answers to that. I mean, that's in a crystal ball somewhere, but I know that the wanting for clarity is universal. And then lastly, I do know that it's confronting. I do recognize that getting there is confronting. It's going to require some new things. It's going to require some new ways of thinking. It's going to require some new ways of going about life, of communicating, and that's confronting. I get that. But I promise you there are results on the other side of that, and I want to really encourage you to dive deep, to commit to the clarity that, again, I think is universal, and that I think people deserve if they give themselves the opportunity to find it. I think most of us hide from it, and because in that ambiguity, we don't have to be honest with ourselves. We don't have to be honest with others. So it's easier to hide than to be truthful and to say, I'm not doing it right. I'm not running in the right direction. I'm not doing, whatever it is. I mean, again, that's confronting. I want to recognize that, but I also want to highlight what's on the other side of that. So with that in mind, let's talk about how to get clarity. Let's reset as we come into the latter part of January here. Things are off and running. Million miles an hour. We've already got irons in the fire, whatever that looks and feels like for you. I'm sure, like most people, you already feel behind. And let's go through 3 steps to reset and get clarity. First one, I want you to name the season that you're in. So I talked about this earlier, right? When I went through what it actually the questions you're going to ask yourself. If someone's going to audit your life for 10 minutes from the outside, the first thing is you have to recognize the current season that you're in. So what matters most right now? So in an effort to get clarity and to bring that into focus, I want you to name the season that you're in right now. And it can be, I'll give you a few examples. I'll give you several examples of what that season can sound like. You could be in a season of training to be better. training to be more fit, training to be smarter, training to acquire the skills and tools and relationships you need to accomplish your goals. You could be in a season of building a life that you want, building a body that you want, building a business that you want, building a relationship. You could be in a season of healing. Maybe you're coming off of something that you need to take some time to just sit with. So you could be in a season of healing. You could be in a season of leading yourself, leading others, leading your family. You could be in a season of simplifying, cutting out the noise, focus on what matters, saying no to more things. You could be in a season of exploring options, opportunities. So I want you to name the season that you're in. Next is I want you to choose one priority that defines success for this season. Notice I said one priority, not 10 goals, not a long list, I want you to find one priority that defines success for this season. Right, this is going to anchor you. So this is going to be hard because it's easy to spout off a million goals. We think goal setting is hard. It's actually easy to dream and to forecast and to say, oh, these are all the things. I want you to distill that down. Choose one priority that defines success for this season. Last thing, I want you to list 3 things that don't support it. Now we're going to identify what you can get rid of. Okay, so I'm going to recap that. Name the season you're in. What is it? Building, healing, leading, simplifying, exploring. Put your own language to it. What is the season you're in? I want you to choose one priority that defines success for the season. So when you are on the other side of this season, and there are many seasons of life, you will turn this page just like you've turned other ones. When you turn this page, what is the thing that is going to define success? I want you to drill down. The way that this is done is you can answer the question, was I successful, yes or no, in alignment as defined by the priority that I wrote down, right? One priority that defines success for the season. Next thing, now I want you to list 3 things that do not support what you just wrote down for our priority. Habits, commitments, expectations, identities. I want you to write down 3 things that do not support the singular priority that you identified that is going to define success in this season. There you go, right? That's clarity right there. There's 3 things that you will have written down that do not align with what you said equals success. Start to move towards shedding those things, right? What that means is that I'm not advocating that there's some big overhaul to your systems, right? I'm advocating that there are fewer contradictions, or there need to be fewer contradictions that ultimately will yield the clarity and success that you want. Right? So I really want you to move on these things. When you identify the 3 things that do not support your priority, I want you to really work to understand how to get rid of those things. And with that, I want you to think about what that means for clarity. And when we understand more clearly how we show up, that's what gives us our agency back. We think about leadership externally. So we think about clarity, we think about it's task orientation, right? I'm sure there's so many people out there right now, you're listening, say, okay, when I get clear, I'll be more clear on how I lead my team, how I do my work, how I communicate with my coach, and that's good. Those are important. But I'd also like to offer up a reframe for leadership more broadly and what clarity will actually provide you. It will firstly allow you to lead your body better, meaning that when you are more clear inevitably, every time I've ever seen this play out in a way that is productive, people make more time for themselves, mentally and physically. That's a win. So you lead yourself better. You lead your family better. You lead your work better. And then you lead your attention better. Your attention is a commodity. It needs to be protected. It needs to be led well. And leadership without clarity creates friction, and it creates friction in every single area of our lives. It also creates friction for you and everyone else around you. So lest you think that radical clarity only impacts you, arguably it impacts everybody else around you more and first before it comes back to you. We can put up with a lot. And we've built systems and processes around us to support our ambiguity, to support our lack of clarity, to support the friction that we feel on a daily basis. The people around us haven't. They're putting up with it every single day, and it's impacting them negatively. So radical clarity is not about control. It's about deciding what deserves your endurance and attention. Right? It is not about controlling. Again, I made that distinction earlier. I think that control is good. Controlling is not what we're talking about. But I want you to invite a level of radical clarity into your life that allows you to get clear on what deserves your attention, what deserves your input, what deserves the endurance, the thing that you're pushing through, so that you can be excited about it. If you're already into January and you're feeling stacked up and piled and your schedule's busy and you already feel behind and you're feeling frustrated and irritable and all the things, then this is for you. It doesn't have to be that way. Just take a second. Again, identify what is your priority, what defines success in this season. Identify 3 things that are not in support of that and just work to move those. Doesn't have to be a huge overhaul, but small bits of clarity do add up to be radical, right? That's why I use that language intentionally. So I hope this is helpful. I hope you walk away feeling like you have some agency to gain some clarity. As always, thank you so much to our listeners. If you have been around for a long time or you're new here, welcome and welcome back. As always, you can find us at enduranceMinded.com. Let us know what's going on. Scroll to the bottom. Leave us a note. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on all major platforms. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, please take a moment to rate, subscribe so you can be alerted of new episodes every other Tuesday, and share this episode or your favorite with a friend or someone that you think could use some clarity at this point in the year. It means the world. Thanks so much. Excited for a new year, and stay tuned. We'll see you next time on Endurance Minded.